I administered the first treatment on the 16th day of my residency in Spire Argentum. The solution was clear, faintly luminescent, contained in a vial sealed with the Medicae officio stamp. Temperature: 4 degrees Celsius when I retrieved it from the stasis vault. The patient was Lord Castellan Varen, age 147, presenting with cellular degradation consistent with natural senescence. I injected 50 milliliters into the subclavian vein. His pupils dilated, respiration normalized within 40 seconds. The age lines around his eyes softened over the following week. I logged the treatment as successful. I did not question the contents. My name was Talvin Morrock. I was 23 standard years old. I had passed the Medicae certification trials with marks sufficient to earn placement in the upper spire, where the air was filtered and the light came from lumens powered by reliable plasma cores rather than the stuttering glow strips of the mid-hive where I was born. My mother worked textile fabrication on level 47. She died when a loom mechanism failed and crushed her thoracic cavity. She was 31. I was 14. I remember the temperature of her hand when I held it in the Medicae ward, already cooling 34 degrees Celsius, dropping toward ambient. The chirurgeon told me she had been fortunate to die quickly. I decided then that I would learn to prevent such deaths, or at least understand why they occurred. The Schola Medicae accepted me based on aptitude scores, 7 years of training. Anatomy, chemistry, surgical procedure, pharmacological application. I learned to see the human body as a system of components that could fail, be repaired, or replaced. I learned the prayers to the omnicia that preceded each surgery. I learned to document everything: observation, hypothesis, result. The body did not lie. Data did not deceive. When I received my assignment to Spire Argentum, my proctor told me I should be grateful. The upper Spire Medicae facilities served the planetary nobility, the merchant princes, the high clergy. Clean environments, advanced equipment, patients who could afford treatments beyond the standard issue wound, cauterization and infection suppression available to the lower levels. Patients who lived long enough to require management of age-related degradation rather than traumatic injury or industrial accident. I was grateful. I recorded this in my personal log on the day of my arrival. The Spire Medicae facility occupied floors 847 through 851 of the central tower. The walls were polished rockcrete, sterile white, maintained daily by servitor units. The operating theaters had adjustable lumens that produced light at 5,500 Kelvin, approximating natural sunlight, though I had never seen natural sunlight and would not for another 30 years. The air smelled of counterseptic and the particular mechanical oil used to maintain the surgical augmetic arms. My assigned quarters measured 4 meters by 6 meters, a private chamber with a sleeping pallet, a desk, a data terminal with access to the Medicae archives, luxury beyond anything I had known. I met Chirurgeon, Principal Gavin, on my second day. He was 96 years old. He moved with the steady precision of a man whose joints had been reinforced with low-grade augmetics. His skin was smooth, unblemished, stretched tight over his skull in a way that suggested dermal regeneration treatments. His eyes were pale gray, the color of recycled water. He showed me the pharmacy vault, 7 levels of climate-controlled storage, row upon row of treatment vials, each labeled with Imperial Gothic script and a purity seal. Antibiotics, analgesics, surgical adhesives, neural stimulants, and an entire section dedicated to Rejuvenat compounds. "You will administer these," Gavin said. He selected a vial from the nearest rack. "This is compound 17. Stem cell suspension with genetic repair enzymes. Reverses cellular senescence at the chromosomal level. One treatment extends viable lifespan by approximately 10 years. Side effects include temporary neural sensitivity, increased metabolic rate, occasional hemorrhaging at injection site. Manageable." I held the vial. It was warm, 22 degrees Celsius, body temperature. The liquid inside moved with unusual viscosity, thicker than standard saline solution. "What is the source?" I asked. G. Haven looked at me. The source, the stem cells, the base material, grown in industrial vats, he said. The Biologius Mechanicus facilities in Mid-Hive. Standard procedure. You will find the documentation in the archives if you require it for your logs. I did not require it. I administered the treatments as directed. Lord Varen, Lady Essendra, Merchant Commander Holis. 12 patients in my first month. All responded positively. I documented dosage, reaction time, side effects. The data was consistent. The treatments worked. The patients lived. I helped them live. This was what I had trained for. At night, in my quarters, I accessed the Medicae archives. I read documentation on Rejuvenat synthesis. The files described bioreactor systems, growth vats, nutrient solution compositions, chemical formulas that meant nothing to me. I was a Medicae, not a geneticist. The processes were managed by the Adeptus Mechanicus, blessed by the Machine God, certified pure by the Ecclesiarchy. My role was administration, not production. I noted, reading the documentation, that the stem cell cultures required fresh genetic templates to maintain viability. New base material introduced monthly to prevent degradation. The files did not specify the source of these templates. I assumed they were synthetic, or perhaps extracted from sanctioned donors. The Imperium had 1 million worlds, billions of citizens. Surely some volunteered. Surely some were compensated. I did not investigate further. This was in the 3rd year of my service that I met Veles. He arrived for standard cardiovascular maintenance. He was 68, had received Rejuvenat treatments for 20 years, required periodic system regulation. I performed the examination. Blood pressure, 130/85. Respiration, 16 breaths per minute. Cardiac rhythm, stable with minor arrhythmia, correctable. His file indicated he was a logistics coordinator for the Spire supply chains. Not noble-born, but wealthy enough to afford longevity treatments. He had purchased his way into the upper Spire through 3 decades of competent service. He spoke to me while I worked. Most patients did not. Most considered Medicae staff to be functionaries, little different from servitors. Veles asked me how long I had been in the Spire, where I had trained. Whether I enjoyed the work, I answered factually. 7 years in Spire Argentum, Schola Medicae, Mid-Hive campus. The work was satisfactory. I was performing the function I had been trained for. You are young, he said. You have time to take treatments yourself eventually. If you save your stipend, if you advance to chirurgeon status, you could afford perhaps 1 or 2 cycles. Live to see 120, 130. Not enough to reach the ages of the high nobility, but enough to matter. I had not considered this. My stipend accumulated in the facility accounts, unused except for basic necessities. I had nothing to spend it on. No family to support. No recreational interests beyond my work. But the idea lodged itself in my mind. I could extend my own lifespan. I could have time to refine my skills, to understand more, to prevent more deaths. The thought was appealing. I noted this in my personal log. Veles returned monthly for his maintenance appointments. He continued to speak to me. He told me about the supply chains he managed, the networks of transit tubes and cargo lifts that moved materials between the Spire and the lower levels. Food shipments from the agri-levels, manufactured goods from the mid-hive factories, raw materials from the underhive processing plants. Everything the Spire required flowed upward through systems he coordinated. The numbers are staggering, he said during one appointment. Thousands of tons daily, just to keep the Spire functioning. And that's only the visible infrastructure. There are secondary systems most people never think about. Waste reclamation, biological material transport, the things that keep a city of 50 million alive. I found his descriptions oddly precise. He spoke about logistics the way I spoke about anatomy, as interconnected systems that required constant maintenance to prevent catastrophic failure. The Medicae facilities have their own supply lines, he mentioned once. Separate from standard Spire provisions, direct transit from the biologist facilities, temperature-controlled transport, high-priority routing. The Rejuvenat compounds have to remain viable during transfer. Degradation would be expensive. It was logistically sound. Specialized materials required specialized handling. "Have you ever seen the biology's facilities?" I asked. Velis paused. He was silent for 4 seconds. "Once," he said. "Early in my service, standard inspection of the transit routes. They did not permit extensive observation, security protocols, mechanicus sanctity, the usual restrictions." "What did you see?" "Vats," he said. "Processing equipment. Nothing remarkable. The mechanicus does not explain its methods to civilians." His heart rate had increased, 92 beats per minute, elevated by 18% from baseline. I noted this, but did not comment. Patients often experienced anxiety when discussing unfamiliar topics. It was not clinically significant. Our appointments continued. Over 2 years, he became the closest thing I had to regular human contact outside of professional duty. I would not have called him a friend. I did not think in those terms. But I recognized his arrival on the appointment schedule. I allocated slightly more time to his examinations than strictly necessary. I listened when he spoke. It was Velis who first suggested I request access to the supply documentation. "You are meticulous," he said. "I have watched you work. You document everything. You verify dosages. You cross-reference treatment protocols. But you administer compounds without knowing their precise composition beyond what the labels provide." "The mechanicus provides certification," I said. "The compounds are verified pure." "Of course," he said. "But as a Medicae, do you not want to understand the mechanisms, how the treatments function at the molecular level? A logistics coordinator knows every step of a supply chain. Should a Medicae not know every component of a treatment?" The logic was sound. I had been administering Rejuvenat compounds for 9 years. I could recite the visible effects, the documented side effects, the success rates, but I could not explain the underlying biochemistry beyond the summary data in the archives. I had accepted the system as functional without understanding why it functioned. This bothered me once Velis pointed it out. I submitted a request to Churajan, Principal Gavin, for expanded documentation on Rejuvenat compound synthesis. The request was denied within 6 hours. Reason cited: restricted information, mechanicus proprietary methodology, not relevant to Medicae function. I submitted a second request, framed differently. I indicated I wished to optimize treatment protocols, to better anticipate patient reactions, to improve documented outcomes. The request was approved 3 weeks later with conditions: observation only, no direct access to production data, supervision required. I was assigned a visit to Biologist Facility 7 in Mid-Hive Level 312. Velis arranged the logistics. The transport departed at 0600 hours. Travel time, 47 minutes through the spire's central transit shaft, then lateral through the mid-hive infrastructure. I had not left the spire in 9 years. The transition was immediate and visceral. The air quality degraded past level 700. I tasted recycled particulate, chemical residue, the carbon output of 10 million humans compressed into inadequate space. The temperature rose. The lumens flickered. By level 312, the walls were stained with decades of industrial exhaust. Servitors moved through corridors with mechanical precision, hauling cargo containers, maintenance equipment, biological waste processors. The biologist facility occupied a square kilometer of reinforced structure, marked with the cog skull of the Adeptus Mechanicus. I was met by an acolyte whose lower face had been replaced with a brass vox grill. He did not introduce himself. He led me through 3 security checkpoints, each requiring biometric scan and prayer of clearance. The production floor was vast, 30 meters high, extending beyond visual range into darkness, punctuated by red lumens. The sound was constant. Machine hum at 200 Hz, coolant circulation, the rhythmic pulse of pressure systems. Rows of cylindrical vats, each 3 meters in diameter, filled with translucent liquid. Inside, suspended matter, organic tissue in various stages of development. The acolyte's vox grill crackled. Stem cell cultivation, primary growth phase, standard biologist procedure. You may observe, do not approach the vats, do not touch the equipment. Machine spirits require sanctity. I observed. The vats contained what appeared to be undifferentiated tissue masses, growing in nutrient solution. I could not determine the specific cell types from visual inspection. The liquid was amber-colored, circulating through filtration systems that removed waste products. Each vat was labeled with alphanumeric designations I did not recognize. What is the base genetic material? I asked. Certified templates, the acolyte said. Approved by the Mechanicus. Sufficient for your documentation. The source of the templates? Not relevant to your function. I watched the vats cycle through their growth phases. The tissue masses expanded slowly, accumulating volume, developing complexity. Machines extracted samples through sterile tubes, processed them into smaller containers, prepared them for transport. The entire system operated with mechanical efficiency, no wasted motion, no human intervention beyond the Mechanicus adepts monitoring data screens. I saw nothing that contradicted the official documentation. Biological material grown in vats, processed into Rejuvenat compounds. Industrial production blessed by the machine god. The system was functional. The output was sufficient to supply the spire's demand. The certification seals were properly affixed. I noted all of this in my log. I prepared to leave. The acolyte led me back toward the facility entrance through a different corridor. Operational efficiency. The route reduced transit time by 6 minutes. We passed a secondary chamber. The door was reinforced plasteel, marked with hazard warnings and purity seals. Through a viewing port, I glimpsed another section of the facility. More vats, larger. 4 meters in diameter. The liquid inside was darker, clouded. The suspended matter had structure. I saw shapes, limbs, torsos, faces. I stopped walking. The acolyte continued 4 steps before registering my absence. His vox grill emitted a warning tone. Observation period concluded. Exit required. The shapes in the vats were human. Incomplete, certainly. Developmental stages, possibly. But recognizable. An arm, fully formed, floating in suspension. A partial rib cage with organs attached. A head, eyes closed, tubes inserted into the nasal cavity and throat. What is that chamber? I asked. Restricted processing, not included in your documentation clearance. Those are human components. Biological material, certified by the Mechanicus. Your observation period is concluded. His mechadendrite extended from his robes, humming with activation. Not a threat, precisely, a statement of capability. I was in a Mechanicus facility without authority. I was permitted observation because I had requested it and it had been approved. I was not permitted inquiry beyond my designated clearance. I left the facility. I returned to the spire. I did not document what I had seen through the viewing port. I told myself it was not relevant. I had seen biological material in various stages of processing. The Mechanicus cultivated human tissue for medical purposes. This was known. Organ replacement, augmetic integration, regenerative therapy. The vats contained components, not individuals. Material, not persons. This logic did not satisfy me. I could not identify why. I did not speak to Velis about it at his next appointment. I performed the examination, updated his file, dismissed him. He asked if the facility visit had been informative. I said it had been adequate. He watched me for 7 seconds without speaking, then nodded and left. I continued administering treatments. Lord Varen, Lady Essendra, Merchant Commander Halis. 16 new patients that month. The Rejuvenate compounds arrived from the Biologist facility in temperature-controlled containers, properly sealed, certified pure. I injected them. The patients improved. Cellular regeneration proceeded as documented. Lives extended by years, by decades. I observed each injection. I watched the compounds enter the bloodstream, disperse through the system, begin their cellular repair work. I wondered each time whether the liquid I administered contained material from the vats I had seen, whether the stem cells suspended in solution had once been part of a recognizable structure, whether I was transferring existence from one form into another. These thoughts were not productive. I noted them in my personal log and attempted to dismiss them. 3 months after the facility visit, Velis did not appear for his scheduled appointment. I checked the registry. His entry was marked, "Appointment rescheduled. Administrative hold." No explanation provided. I waited. The hold remained in place for 2 weeks. On the 16th day, I accessed the Spire transit records, a minor breach of protocol, but within my technical capability. Velis's ident marker last registered in the upper spire 14 days prior. Exit logged to mid-hive level 284. No return transit recorded. I submitted an inquiry to the Spire Administrative Office. The response arrived within an hour. Logistics Coordinator Velis reassigned to alternate duties. Current location classified. No further information available. I did not see him again. Without Velis, I had no one who spoke to me beyond functional necessity. Chirurgeon, Principal Gavin, delivered instructions. Patients received treatment. Servitors maintained the facility. I performed my duties. I documented everything. The routine was absolute. I began reviewing the transit logs more carefully. Supply shipments from the Biologies facilities arrived every 4 days. Temperature-controlled containers, high-priority routing, direct delivery to the pharmacy vault. I cross-referenced the shipment volumes with patient treatment schedules. The numbers were consistent, adequate supply for documented demand. Then I began tracking the other direction. Raw material shipments into the Biologists facilities, nutrient compounds, chemical reagents, industrial supplies, all properly logged, but also biological intake, recorded in weight, not units, thousands of kilograms monthly. The logs classified it as certified template material, source-approved districts. I accessed the district designations. They corresponded to underhive zones, levels 1 through 50. Population density, extreme. Economic status, subsistence. Life expectancy, 38 years standard. I calculated the volume, 4,000 kilograms per month, average human body mass, 70 kilograms. The arithmetic was simple, approximately 57 individuals per month, 684 per year. I had been administering treatments for 11 years. The facility had operated for at least a century before my arrival. I sat in my quarters for 2 hours, staring at the numbers in my data terminal. I did not move. I did not log this time as rest period. My mind processed the data repeatedly, attempting to identify an error in my calculations. An alternative explanation that would reconcile what I had seen in the biologist facility with what the official documentation claimed. I found none. The Rejuvenat compounds were made from people, not grown from synthetic templates, not extracted from voluntary donors, harvested, processed, reduced to component chemicals and cellular material. The underhive population, those who lived in darkness, who died young, who never saw the spire, were raw material for the nobility's immortality. I had been administering these treatments for 11 years. I had extended the lives of 147 individuals. Each treatment contained material from someone who no longer existed, someone whose body had been reduced to weight measured in kilograms, transported in containers, processed in vats. I had helped 147 people live longer by participating in the deaths of thousands. The recognition did not arrive as shock or horror. It settled into my awareness like data integrating into a system. A fact previously unknown, now known. An understanding achieved through observation and calculation. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my terminal and compiled a report. I documented my observations from the biologist facility. I included my calculations based on the supply logs. I cited imperial regulations regarding sanctity of human life, the value of souls in service to the emperor, the prohibitions against unauthorized biological experimentation. I prepared a detailed analysis demonstrating that the current Rejuvenat synthesis process violated multiple Departamento Munitorum ethical protocols. I submitted the report to Cheerson, Principal Haven at 0730 hours. He summoned me to his office at 0745 hours. The office overlooked the spire's central atrium from level 849. Through the reinforced windows, I could see 300 meters down. Transit tubes, walkways, the movement of spire personnel conducting their daily functions. Caven stood at the window with his hands clasped behind his back. "You visited Biologus Facility 7, he said, with approved clearance. You accessed supply transit logs. Within my terminal access privileges, you compiled this report." He gestured to a data slate on his desk. "My documentation." Why? The Rejuvenat synthesis process utilizes human subjects as raw material. This contradicts official documentation. I believed the discrepancy should be addressed. His expression had not changed. His pale gray eyes registered no emotion. "Dr. Morok, you are 34 years old. You have served in this facility for 11 years with exemplary performance. Your documentation is precise. Your treatment success rate exceeds facility average by 4%. You have never before submitted a report questioning operational procedures. Why now? I did not previously have sufficient data to identify the discrepancy. And now that you have identified it, what do you expect will result from this report?" The question was reasonable. I had not fully considered it. I had compiled the report because the data required documentation, because discrepancies required correction, because I had been trained to identify problems and report them through proper channels. "Investigation," I said. "Corrective action. Alignment of actual procedures with documented protocols." Caven picked up the data slate. He held it for 3 seconds. Then he dropped it into the incineration chute beside his desk. I heard it clatter down the shaft, heard the ignition burst as it reached the plasma core. "Dr. Morok," Caven said, "do you know how many people live in hive praxis?" "Approximately 53 million, according to last census." 53 million, he repeated. "In the spire and upper hive, perhaps 200,000 receive Rejuvenat treatments. The planetary governor, the noble houses, the upper administrative officials, the ecclesiarchy hierarchy. These individuals govern the hive. They maintain order, they ensure compliance with imperial law. They coordinate tithe production, they prevent the hive from collapsing into chaos. Their continued function is essential. Do you understand this? I understand the organizational structure. These individuals cannot function if they die of age-related degradation after 70 or 80 years. Training a replacement takes decades. Institutional knowledge is lost. Stability suffers. Therefore, they must live longer. The Rejuvenat treatments enable this. The treatments require biological material. Where should this material come from? The question was rhetorical. Caven continued. The underhive population lives in conditions you cannot imagine. Starvation, disease, gang violence, industrial accidents. Their life expectancy is 38 years. They die regardless. We simply ensure their deaths serve a purpose. The material is harvested from individuals who are dying anyway. Terminal illness, fatal injuries. The body is processed before death would occur naturally. Hours, perhaps a day earlier than inevitable. Their suffering is abbreviated. Their flesh serves the Imperium. This is not murder, Doctor. This is resource optimization. They are not volunteers, I said. They are citizens of the Imperium. Their lives belong to the Emperor. The Administratum determines how those lives are best utilized. The underhive produces 3 things: labor, military conscripts, and biological material. This is their function. The system is efficient. The system is necessary. The system is sanctioned by the highest levels of planetary authority. The documentation describes the material as synthetic. The documentation describes what the nobility prefers to believe. They know, of course. At some level they understand, but they do not want it stated explicitly. So we provide them comfortable euphemisms, synthetic templates, certified donors, growth vats. The treatments work. That is what matters. Gavin returned to the window. He watched the spire's activity for 18 seconds before speaking again. You have a choice, Dr. Morrock. You can accept what you now know and continue your function. You will receive accelerated promotion to chirurgeon status within 2 years. Your stipend will increase. You will become eligible for Rejuvenate treatments yourself. 1 cycle, perhaps 2. You will live to 120, 130. You will continue to serve the Imperium by maintaining the health of those who govern it. This is a valuable life. This is a life worth living. Or, I asked, or you can refuse to continue. You will be reassigned. The Underhive requires Medicae for their population as well. Basic trauma care, infection management. Average life expectancy for Underhive Medicae is 7 years. Alternatively, your skills might be valuable to the Departamento Munitorum. Field medic positions are always available. Life expectancy, variable, depending on deployment. The Imperium has numerous options for a qualified Medicae who no longer wishes to serve in the Spire. I understood. The choice was not between complicity and ethics. The choice was between complicity with comfortable survival and complicity with suffering or death. I will continue my function, I said. Gavin nodded. Wise. You will not submit further reports on this matter. You will not discuss your observations with other personnel. You will administer treatments as directed. If you maintain these conditions, your service record will remain exemplary. I returned to my duties. I administered treatments that afternoon. Lord Varen, presenting for his quarterly maintenance. Lady Ascendra, beginning her 3rd Rejuvenat cycle. I injected the compounds, I logged the dosages, I monitored the reactions. I knew what the liquid contained. I injected it anyway. The patients improved, their cellular structures regenerated, their lives extended. I participated in this extension. I enabled it. I was complicit in the deaths that made it possible. This knowledge did not fade. It integrated into my awareness as permanent background process. Every treatment I administered, I calculated the cost. 50 milliliters of compound, approximately 0.07 kilograms of processed material, 1/40th of a human body. Every 14 treatments I performed consumed 1 person from the Underhive. I performed 16 treatments per month. I consumed approximately 1 person monthly. In 11 years, I had consumed 132 individuals. I would continue consuming them. I had chosen to continue. The alternative was reassignment. The alternative was pointless death in service to the same system that produced this horror. If I died, another Medicae would take my position. The treatments would continue. The Underhive would continue being harvested. My refusal would change nothing except which specific Medicae administered the injections. This logic was sound. This logic did not comfort me. I attempted to identify the exact moment I had become what I now was. Not when I learned the truth. That was simply information acquisition. The transformation occurred when I chose to continue. When I weighed my survival against their deaths and decided my survival held more value. When I accepted Caven's terms and returned to the treatment chambers. That moment. That choice. That was when I crossed from witness to participant. I documented this in my personal log. Then I deleted the entry. Some data should not be archived. I worked. Years passed. I received my promotion to chirurgeon status. My stipend increased by 40%. My quarters expanded to 8 meters by 6 meters. I supervised 4 junior Medicae, training them in treatment protocols, surgical procedures, documentation standards. I did not tell them what the Rejuvenate compounds contained. They would learn eventually, or they would not. Either way, they would continue administering treatments. The system was efficient. I was 38 years old when I administered my first treatment to myself. Chirurgeon, Principal Haven, authorized it personally. I had served 17 years with exemplary performance. My documentation was flawless. My treatment success rate exceeded facility average by 7%. I had earned longevity. The compound was Rejuvenat Compound 22, an upgraded formulation with enhanced cellular penetration. I prepared the injection in my quarters at 2300 hours. 50 milliliters, drawn from a sealed vial loaded into a standard medical injector. Temperature, 22 degrees Celsius. The liquid caught the light from my desk lumen, faintly luminescent, amber-tinted. I held the injector against my subclavian vein. I felt the pressure of the nozzle against my skin. I thought about Velis, who had disappeared after guiding me toward knowledge I should not have pursued. I thought about my mother, crushed by industrial equipment at 31, who never had the opportunity to live longer. I thought about the individual, male or female, young or old, I would never know, whose processed remains were suspended in the liquid I was about to inject. I pressed the trigger. The compound entered my bloodstream. Cool spreading sensation through my chest, radiating outward. My heart rate increased to 94 beats per minute. Neural sensitivity spiked. Colors became sharper, sounds clearer. The effects documented in my own treatment logs, now experienced firsthand. I lived. I chose to live. I paid the price in someone else's death. The treatment was successful. Over the following months, cellular markers indicated regeneration. Skin elasticity improved. Minor joint degradation reversed. Metabolic efficiency increased. I gained approximately 12 years of viable lifespan, according to post-treatment analysis. I would require additional treatments every 15 to 20 years to maintain the effect. I was approved for up to 4 cycles total, sufficient to reach age 135, possibly 140. Not the multi-century lifespans of the high nobility who could afford premium compounds and more frequent treatments, but substantially beyond the natural span of an unaugmented human. Sufficient time to consume perhaps 6 more people from the underhive, distributed across my remaining life. This calculation became automatic. Every patient I treated, I calculated their consumption. Every year I lived, I recalculated my own. The numbers accumulated in my mind like vital signs, constantly updated, never quite forgotten. I continued my function. I supervised the junior Medicae. I administered treatments. I trained replacements for positions vacated by retirement or death. The facility operated with mechanical efficiency. We maintained the health of the nobility. We extended their lives. We performed our duty to the Imperium. I encountered the harvesting operation directly only once. I was 53 years old. My second Rejuvenat cycle had been administered 4 years prior. I was supervising a supply inspection routine verification that shipment contents matched manifest declarations. A container had been flagged by Servitor Scan as containing biological material with incorrect temperature regulation. Potential contamination risk. I was required to examine it personally. The container was 2 meters long, cylindrical, marked with Mechanicus seals and hazard warnings. Internal temperature, 7 degrees Celsius, 3 degrees above optimal for cellular preservation. Not sufficient to cause immediate degradation, but requiring inspection. I opened the seal. Inside, a human body, male, approximately 25 years old, estimated from bone structure and tissue development. Cause of death, unclear from external examination, possibly cranial trauma, possibly exsanguination. The body had been prepared for transport. Major vessels cannulated, preservative solution injected, extremities secured. Attached to the container was a data slate with processing documentation. Subject acquired from Underhive Level 23. Classification. Terminal injury. Survival probability less than 5%. Acquisition authorized under Administrative Directive 7743. Sigma. Transport approved. Biological value assessed at 68 kilograms usable material. The slate included an image captured at acquisition, the subject's face, eyes open, expression registering pain or fear, or both. Human, conscious or recently so, aware enough to understand what was happening or about to happen. I examined the body for 6 minutes. I verified the preservation solution had maintained tissue integrity. I confirmed the temperature deviation had not caused significant degradation. I resealed the container and authorized its continued transport to Biologist Facility 7. I logged the inspection as complete. I did not log the image I had seen. I did not document the expression on the subject's face. That night, I attempted to calculate how many times I had seen that face before, suspended in the compounds I had administered, how many treatments I had performed, how many vials I had opened, how many times I had injected material that had once looked back at me with human eyes. The calculation was impossible. The treatments blurred together. The faces, if I had ever seen them, were lost in archive, inaccessible, deleted by time and repetition. I took my third Rejuvenat treatment at age 72. Compound 27, newest formulation, superior cellular integration. Another 12 years of viable lifespan. Another person consumed. I registered the injection without emotional response. The data was routine. Surgeon, Principal Haven died at age 163. Natural cellular failure despite Rejuvenate maintenance. His augmatic joints continued functioning after his brain activity ceased. The servitors removed his body to the corpse processing facility. I was promoted to his position. I became chirurgeon, principal of Spire Argentum Medicae facility. I supervised 114 Medicae across 7 facilities in the Spire. I coordinated treatment schedules for 4,000 nobility and upper administrative personnel. I managed supply chains, staffing rotations, equipment maintenance protocols. I reported directly to the planetary governor's office. I received access to expanded Rejuvenat authorization, up to 8 cycles total, sufficient for approximately 190 years viable lifespan. I accepted the authorization. I administered my 4th treatment at age 95. The new Medicae I supervised looked at me the way I had once looked at Gavin, with respect bordering on fear. I was 112 years old and appeared 60. I had served the Medicae for 89 years. I had trained 3 generations of personnel. I had administered or supervised an estimated 37,000 Rejuvenate treatments. I had consumed, by my ongoing calculation, approximately 914 individuals from the underhive. I knew their deaths served a purpose. I maintained the health of those who governed the hive. I enabled their continued function. I preserved institutional knowledge. I prevented chaos. The Imperium required this. The system was efficient. I told myself this frequently. The internal repetition became automatic, like breathing, like heartbeat, like the prayers to the emperor that preceded each surgical procedure. Sometimes I wondered if I still believed it. Sometimes I could not remember whether I had ever believed it. The distinction seemed irrelevant. Belief did not change my function. I would continue regardless of what I believed. At age 127, I administered my 5th Rejuvenate treatment. The supervising Medicae was a woman. Exception to standard protocol, but she had proven capable. Named Kellis. She had served for 12 years. She performed the injection with proper technique, 50 milliliters, subclavian vein, monitored reaction time. She asked me how long I had been receiving treatments. 89 years, I said. She processed this. You have taken 5 cycles. You are approved for 8 total. You could live to 200. Perhaps longer if the new compounds continue improving. Perhaps. Do you want to? The question surprised me. I had not considered want as a relevant variable. I continued living because I was capable of continuing, because I had access to the treatments, because stopping would mean dying, and dying was failure. I will continue as long as I am capable of function, I said. She nodded. She did not press further. But I saw her expression, curiosity mixed with something else, pity, possibly, or horror at the prospect of 2 centuries performing the same duty. I dismissed her. I processed the treatment effects. Cellular regeneration proceeded normally. I gained another 12 years approximately. I consumed another person. The arithmetic was simple. I had now consumed 11 people directly through my own treatments and participated in the consumption of thousands through the treatments I administered to others. If I continued to maximum authorized lifespan, approximately 200 years total, I would consume 16 people for my own survival. 16 lives traded for mine. 16 individuals from the underhive who died so I could continue documenting treatments, supervising Medicae, maintaining the health of nobility, who would also consume hundreds more. The system perpetuated itself. Each person kept alive through Rejuvenat treatments had the authority and resources to ensure the system continued producing Rejuvenat treatments. Each Medicae, trained to administer the treatments, became dependent on the system for their own survival. Each new generation integrated into the machinery without questioning its foundations, because questioning changed nothing. I had questioned once. I had documented the truth. I had submitted a report. Surgeon Principal Haven had incinerated it and offered me a choice that was not really a choice. I had chosen survival. I had chosen complicity. I had chosen to become what I now was. I tried to identify when I stopped feeling the weight of this, when the deaths I enabled transitioned from moral burden to background calculation, when I stopped seeing faces and started seeing numbers. The transition had been gradual, spread across decades, erosion so slow I could not mark the moment I had fully changed. Perhaps there was no single moment. Perhaps I had been changing since the day I first administered a treatment without questioning its contents. Perhaps the capacity for this had always existed in me, waiting for the right conditions to develop. I had wanted to prevent deaths. I had become a Medicae because my mother died, and I believed understanding the body would allow me to stop such deaths. Instead, I had learned that preventing some deaths required causing others, that the system demanded sacrifice, that mercy and murder was separated by perspective and scale. The Imperium functioned through this exchange. Millions died in the underhive so thousands could govern from the spire. Billions died on battlefields so trillions could live under imperial protection. The individual was nothing. The system was everything. This was doctrine. This was faith. This was truth verified by 10,000 years of continuous function. I believed this because I participated in it, or I participated in it because I believed this. The causation was circular, self-reinforcing, impossible to separate. At age 149, I encountered another Medicae who questioned the system. His name was Thrace. He was 31 years old, 7 years out of Schola Medicae, recently promoted to senior treatment specialist. He submitted a request for expanded documentation on Rejuvenate synthesis. The request was identical to the one I had submitted 115 years prior. I summoned him to my office. I stood at the same window Caven had stood at when he explained the truth to me. I looked down at the spire's central atrium, watching personnel conduct their functions 300 meters below. "You visited Biologist Facility 7, I said. He confirmed. I knew he had. I had approved the clearance myself, following standard procedure for Medicae who requested such access. The facility tours were permitted. The Mechanicus understood that some Medicae would eventually seek to understand the compounds they administered. The tours showed enough to answer surface questions, not enough to reveal the full operation. Those who investigated further either accepted the system or were reassigned. "You compiled documentation questioning the synthesis process," I said. He confirmed. I had read his report. It was thorough, well-reasoned, properly cited. It demonstrated the same meticulous attention to data that I had once prided myself on. "What do you expect will result?" I asked. "Investigation, corrective action. The system contradicts. The system functions," I interrupted. "The system is necessary. The system is sanctioned." I delivered the same explanation Gavin had delivered to me. The population statistics, the governance requirements, the necessity of institutional continuity, the underhive's inevitable suffering, the optimization of death into purpose. the comfortable euphemisms that allowed the nobility to accept what sustained them. Thrace listened. His expression shifted as I spoke. Confusion, recognition, horror, understanding. I watched him process the information the way I had processed it. I watched him realize that the discrepancy he had identified was not error to be corrected, but foundation to be accepted. "You are aware of this," he said. "You continue anyway." "I continue because the alternative is pointless. If I stop, another takes my position. The treatments continue. The system continues. My refusal changes nothing except which specific Medicae bears the knowledge. Then why not refuse? If the outcome is identical, why not maintain your integrity?" It was one I had asked myself repeatedly over the decades. I had arrived at various answers, none fully satisfactory. "Because I wish to live," I said finally. "Because I am afraid of death. Because I have invested 126 years in this function, and abandoning it now would render that investment meaningless. Because I tell myself that maintaining the health of those who govern prevents greater suffering than the deaths required to produce the treatments. Because I am weak. Choose whichever answer you prefer." "All of them are true," Thrace said. "Yes." He stood silent for 93 seconds. I did not interrupt his processing. He was deciding which version of himself he would become. The Medicae who refused and was reassigned to death, or the Medicae who accepted and lived long enough to eventually stand where I stood, explaining the same truth to the next generation. "I will continue my function," he said. I nodded. "You will not submit further reports. You will not discuss your observations. You will administer treatments as directed. If you maintain these conditions, you will be eligible for Rejuvenate treatments yourself within 8 years." He left. I watched him return to the treatment chambers through the office window. I saw him prepare an injection for his next patient. I saw him administer it without hesitation. The transition from questioning to complicity took 4 hours. Mine had taken longer, but the progression was identical. We all arrived at the same destination eventually. I took my 6th Rejuvenat treatment at age 163. Compound 31, experimental formulation with nano-augmented cellular penetration. The treatment was more efficient than previous compounds, estimated 20 years lifespan extension, nearly double the earlier formulations. Technological improvement. The Mechanicus continually refined the process. Each generation of compounds extracted more viable lifespan from equivalent material input. The injection caused more severe side effects than previous treatments. Neural sensitivity spiked to painful levels for 3 days. My auditory processing became hypersensitive. I heard frequencies I had never registered before. The high whine of power systems, the subsonic rumble of ventilation, the grinding of distant machinery. My visual processing sharpened until I could see individual dust particles floating in the lumen light. The effects gradually normalized. My nervous system adapted. I returned to standard function, but the enhanced sensory processing lingered at low level. I heard more. I saw more. I noticed details I had previously ignored. I began to hear the sounds of the underhive through the spire structure. At night, in my quarters, if I focused my attention downward, I could hear the distant echo of the lower levels. Machinery. Crowds. The constant background noise of 50 million humans compressed into insufficient space. The sound was faint, filtered through hundreds of meters of rockcrete and steel. But it was there. It had always been there. I had simply never noticed it before. I listened to that sound frequently. It became a form of meditation, acknowledging the source of my continued existence. The distant millions whose deaths I facilitated, their lives compressed into noise, into data, into weight measured in kilograms. At age 177, the planetary governor died. Lord Castellan Varen, whom I had treated since my 2nd year in the Spire, age 147 then, now 212. He had received Rejuvenat treatments for 65 years. His body finally rejected further intervention. Cellular structures failed across multiple systems simultaneously. I attended his final hours, monitoring his decline, documenting the progression. He was conscious until the last 12 minutes. He spoke very little. Once he asked me how long I had been his Medicae. 154 years, I said. He processed this. You will outlive me. Yes, good. Someone should remember. He did not clarify what I should remember. He died 8 minutes later. Cardiac arrest followed by cascade failure. I logged the time of death, 0347 hours. The governor's successor was his grandnephew, Lord Eriston, age 96, Rejuvenat maintained. I had administered his treatments for 40 years. He inherited the position, the authority, the access to extended Rejuvenate authorization that would allow him to govern for another century. The system perpetuated itself. Governors died and were replaced by those they had trained, who had been kept alive by the same treatments, who required the same treatments to continue, who would ensure the system producing the treatments never stopped. I took my 7th Rejuvenat treatment at age 191. Compound 35. Another 20 years estimated extension. I was approved for one final treatment to be administered at approximately age 210. Total projected lifespan, 229 years. I would consume 16 people from the underhive to maintain my own life. I had already consumed 14. 2 more remained. I knew their faces would look like the face I had seen in the transport container 138 years ago. Young, male or female, aware or unconscious, human. I would never know their names. I would never know whether they understood what was happening to them. I would never know if they had families who wondered what became of them. I would inject their processed remains into my veins and continue functioning for another 2 decades. This knowledge no longer produced emotional response. The weight had become structural, load-bearing. Removing it would cause collapse. I carried it because I could not set it down. At age 203, I was the oldest serving Medicae in hive praxis. I had trained 7 generations of medical personnel. I had supervised an estimated 89,000 Rejuvenate treatments. I had maintained the health of 3 planetary governors, 47 noble house patriarchs, 132 ecclesiarchy officials, and thousands of administrative personnel. I had consumed, by final calculation, approximately 2,174 individuals from the underhive through the treatments I administered and supervised. The number was precise. I had maintained the accounting for 169 years. I updated it monthly. I reviewed it before sleep. I ensured I never forgot the cost of my function. Perhaps this was penance. Perhaps this was simply documentation. I could not determine which. The junior Medicae spoke about me in my hearing range, unaware I could register their conversations from adjacent chambers. The enhanced neural sensitivity from my 6th treatment had never fully faded. I heard their speculation. Was I augmented beyond standard Medicae protocols? Was I part servitor, kept functional through mechanical intervention? Had I received experimental treatments unavailable to normal personnel? None of these were accurate. I was simply very old. I had survived long enough to watch generations live and die while I continued. I had accepted the cost of continuation. I had paid it repeatedly. I would pay it once more before my own death. I took my 8th and final authorized Rejuvenate treatment at age 209. The Medicae who administered it was Thrace. He was 90 years old, maintained through 3 Rejuvenate cycles. He had become chirurgeon supervisor of secondary facilities. He would likely succeed me as chirurgeon principal when I died. He prepared the injection with the same meticulous care I had taught him 59 years ago. "This is your final authorized treatment," he said. "Yes. You will have approximately 20 years remaining, possibly 25 if cellular response is optimal. I am aware." He injected the compound. Compound 39, latest formulation, maximum efficiency. I felt the familiar cool spreading through my chest. Neural sensitivity spiked. My heart rate increased to 98 beats per minute. The treatment proceeded normally. "I have served for 59 years, Thrace said while monitoring my reaction. I have administered 4,712 Rejuvenate treatments. I have taken 3 myself. I will be eligible for my 4th in 11 years. You are calculating your consumption, I said. Yes. You taught me to document everything. I document this. Does the knowledge change your function? No. Then why maintain the accounting? He was silent for 42 seconds. Because someone should remember, he said finally. Because if we do not acknowledge the cost, we become the system rather than participants in it. I understood. It was the same reason I had maintained my own accounting for 169 years. The distinction between being the system and participating in the system was philosophical, possibly meaningless. But the act of maintaining the distinction, of documenting the cost, of remembering that numbers represented individuals, preserved some fragment of the person I had been before I understood what I was becoming. Perhaps this was rationalization. Perhaps it was the minimum requirement to remain human while performing inhuman function. The difference was unclear. The treatment was successful. I gained approximately 23 years viable lifespan, according to cellular analysis. I would live to approximately age 232. I would die having consumed 16 people from the underhive for my own survival, and having facilitated the consumption of thousands more. The final years were stable. I continued my function. I supervised the Medicae facilities. I trained personnel. I administered treatments. The routine was absolute, refined across 2 centuries into mechanical precision. I spent more time in my quarters, listening to the distant sound of the underhive through the spire's structure. The enhanced neural sensitivity had become permanent. I heard the lower levels constantly, a background frequency that never quite faded. 50 million humans living, working, dying in darkness. Raw material for the system that kept me alive. Sometimes I attempted to calculate how many of them I had personally consumed. 16 for myself, 2,170, 4 through treatments I administered or supervised. But these numbers were incomplete. They did not account for the Medicae I had trained, who went on to administer thousands more treatments. They did not account for the governors and nobility I had kept alive, who had maintained the system, who had authorized the continued harvesting. They did not account for the 2 centuries I had participated in the machinery, enabling its function through my competence. The true number was incalculable. The system was too interconnected, my complicity too distributed across time and hierarchy. I had touched thousands of lives in the spire, extending them, preserving them. Each extension required deaths I would never witness. Each preservation demanded sacrifice I would never acknowledge except in aggregate. I had wanted to prevent deaths. I had become a Medicae because my mother died and I wished to understand why. I had learned that the Imperium prevented some deaths by causing others, that mercy and murder were tools deployed according to necessity, that my mother's death in the mid-hive served the same function as the deaths in the underhive, fuel for the system that never stopped consuming. The only difference was that I had learned to extract value from the consumption. I had learned to transform death into life extension, suffering into longevity, bodies into compounds. I had learned to document this transformation as medical treatment rather than murder. I had learned to continue regardless of what I knew. At age 227, my cellular degradation accelerated beyond treatment capacity. The Rejuvenate compounds could no longer maintain full regeneration. My joints stiffened, my vision degraded. My neural processing slowed. The decline was gradual but irreversible. I had perhaps 5 years remaining. I continued working. I could still function. My hands remained steady enough for injections. My mind remained clear enough for documentation. I administered treatments until my capability failed. Thrace visited my quarters regularly during this period. He was 108 years old, maintained through 5 Rejuvenate cycles. He would succeed me as surgeon principal. He brought reports on facility operations. He requested guidance on personnel decisions. He sat in my quarters and listened while I spoke about procedures I had refined, observations I had accumulated, data I had compiled across 2 centuries. "You have trained every Medicae currently serving in the Spire," he said during one visit. 7 generations. They all carry your methodology, your standards for documentation, your precision. You have shaped the entire medical system. "I have perpetuated the system," I said. "There is no difference." "Is that what you believe?" After 2 centuries of consideration, I still had no satisfactory answer. I had maintained the system because I participated in it. I participated in it because I wished to live. I wished to live because I feared death. I feared death because I did not know what waited beyond it. Whether the Emperor would judge my service sufficient to outweigh my complicity, whether I would be held accountable for the thousands whose deaths I had enabled, whether I would finally understand why the Imperium demanded this price. "I believe the system functions," I said. "I believe it is necessary. I believe it will continue regardless of what I believe." "That is not an answer." "That is the only answer I have." He did not press further. He understood. He carried the same knowledge I carried. He had made the same choices. He would continue making them for another century, possibly longer. He would eventually sit where I sat, dying after 200 years of complicity, attempting to explain to the next generation why he had continued. The cycle would perpetuate. The system would consume him as it had consumed me, as it consumed everyone who understood its function and chose to participate anyway. At age 231, I administered my final treatment. The patient was a young nobility, Lord Karen, age 43, beginning his first Rejuvenat cycle. I prepared the injection in the treatment chamber. My hands shook. Cellular degradation, loss of fine motor control. I steadied them against the preparation surface. I loaded the injector. 50 milliliters, compound 41. The newest formulation, superior to anything available when I had begun my service 208 years ago. I looked at the compound in the injector. Amber-tinted, faintly luminescent. I thought about the person it had been, young or old, male or female, aware or unconscious. I would never know. The mechanicus had processed them into weight measured in kilograms, transported them in temperature-controlled containers, reduced them to cellular material suspended in solution. I thought about all the people I had reduced the same way, the thousands of injections I had administered, the 2 centuries of continuous participation in deaths I never witnessed but always enabled. I thought about my mother, crushed by industrial equipment at age 31, whose death had motivated me to understand the body, to prevent suffering, to serve the Imperium through medical knowledge. I had served. I had prevented suffering among the nobility. I had enabled suffering among the millions. I had transformed death into life for those with authority to demand it. I had become the system I had once thought I was serving. I administered the injection. Lord Karen's pupils dilated. His respiration normalized. His cellular structures began regenerating. He would live another 12 years beyond his natural span. Perhaps longer if he continued treatments. Perhaps he would live 200 years as I had. Perhaps he would stand where I stood eventually, remembering everyone he had consumed, calculating the cost, understanding that the calculation changed nothing. I logged the treatment. I documented the dosage, the reaction time, the projected outcome, my final entry in 2 centuries of continuous documentation. I collapsed 7 hours later. Systemic cellular failure. Multiple organ degradation. My body had reached its absolute limit. The junior Medicae transported me to a recovery chamber. They administered stabilization treatments. They monitored my decline. Thrace sat beside my pallet for the final hours. He did not speak. There was nothing to say that we both did not already understand. I existed now in a state between function and failure. My neural activity continued. My awareness persisted, but my body had stopped processing the chemicals that maintained it. The Rejuvenat compounds could no longer prevent what was inevitable. I listened to the spire around me, the hum of power systems, the circulation of air, the distant movement of personnel conducting their functions. And beneath it all, through hundreds of meters of structure, the faint sound of the underhive, 50 million humans, raw material, fuel for the system, the foundation that everything else was built upon. I had lived 231 years. I had consumed 16 people directly. I had facilitated the consumption of thousands. I had trained generations of Medicae who would consume thousands more. I had maintained the health of those who governed, who authorized the consumption, who ensured the system never stopped. I had told myself this was necessary, that the Imperium required it, that preventing some deaths demanded causing others. That individual suffering was justified by collective stability. That I was serving the Emperor by maintaining the lives of those who served him. Perhaps this was true. Perhaps it was rationalization. After 2 centuries, I could no longer distinguish between the two. What I knew with certainty, I had made a choice. I had chosen to continue. I had chosen survival over integrity, complicity over refusal, life purchased with others' deaths. I had chosen this repeatedly, across 2 centuries, every treatment I administered, every compound I injected, every year I continued living on borrowed existence. The system had not forced me. The system had simply presented the terms. I had accepted them. I had become what those terms required. The Imperium does not create monsters. It reveals them. It provides the conditions where monstrosity becomes survival, where murder becomes medicine, where you discover that you were always capable of this, that you simply needed sufficient motivation to cross the line. I crossed it. I lived on the far side for 200 years. I counted the cost because counting was all that remained of the person I had been before I understood what I was becoming. Someone should remember. Someone should document. Someone should maintain the accounting even when the numbers become too large to comprehend, when the deaths blur together into statistical aggregate, when the only way to continue is to stop seeing faces and start seeing function. I remembered. I documented. I maintained the accounting. It changed nothing. The system continued. The treatments continued. The underhive continued being consumed. My death would not stop it. My life had not stopped it. My 2 centuries of complicity had enabled it. This is what I carried. This is what I recorded. This is my testament. I was Talvin Morok. I served the Medicae for 208 years. I administered or supervised approximately 93,000 Rejuvenate treatments. I consumed 16 people for my own survival. I facilitated the consumption of approximately 2,417 others through direct action and thousands more through training, supervision, and participation in the system that required their deaths. I knew what I was doing. I continued anyway. This was my choice. This was my service. This was my cost. The Emperor required it. The Imperium demanded it. I delivered it. I existed for 231 years by devouring those who existed for 30 or 40. I purchased time with their bodies. I traded their deaths for my continuation. The arithmetic was simple. The morality was non-existent. This is the Imperium. This is how it functions. This is what it costs. I am dying now. My neural activity is fragmenting. My awareness is fading. Soon I will know whether the Emperor accepts what I have done in his name, whether my service outweighs my complicity, whether 2 centuries of enabling mass murder can be reconciled with 2 centuries of preventing individual deaths. I suspect the answer is that he does not care, that the Imperium does not operate on scales where individual morality matters, that I am simply one more component that functioned for 2 centuries and is now failing, to be replaced by the next component who will function for 2 centuries more, who will make the same choices, who will carry the same knowledge. The system perpetuates. I was part of it. Now I am waste product. I can still hear the underhive, the distant sound through the spire's structure. 50 million humans. Some of them dying now, some of them being harvested. some of them being processed into compounds that will extend the lives of the nobility for another few years. The sound continues. It never stops. It never will. I served the Imperium for 208 years. I learned what it required. I learned what I was capable of providing. I learned that the distance between healer and murderer is measured in milliliters, in authorization codes, in the willingness to continue when you understand exactly what you are doing. I continued. I understood. I chose this. This is my final documentation. This is my complete testimony. This is everything I observed, everything I enabled, everything I became. The treatment chambers are still operating. The compounds are still being produced. The underhive is still being consumed. The nobility are still living their extended lives. The Medicae are still administering the injections. The system functions. The system is necessary. The system is eternal. I participated in it for 231 years. Now I exit it. Someone else will take my position. They will make the same choices. They will carry the same knowledge. They will count the same cost. Or perhaps they will not. Perhaps they will simply function without counting. Perhaps that is easier. Perhaps that is how most people survive in the Imperium, by not calculating what their survival costs others, by not maintaining the accounting, by not remembering that numbers represent faces. I maintained the accounting. I remembered. I counted every single one. It changed nothing, except that I died knowing exactly what I had done. Exactly how many I had consumed. Exactly what I had traded for 2 centuries of continued existence. 16 people died so I could live this long. 2,417 died through treatments I administered or supervised. Thousands more died because I trained the Medicae who administered their treatments, because I maintained the system, because I continued functioning when I could have refused. I remembered them all. I documented them all. I carried them all. This is what the Imperium costs. This is what I paid. This is what I took from others to purchase time I did not deserve. The Emperor required it. I delivered it. I am Talvin Morok. I was a Medicae for 208 years. I administered death disguised as medicine. I consumed lives to extend lives. I served the Imperium. This is my testimony. This is my complete archive. This is everything I witnessed across 2 centuries of complicity. I exist now as failing biological system. Neural activity fragmenting. Cellular structures collapsing. The Rejuvenate compounds have reached their limit. My body has reached its limit. I have reached my limit. I can still hear the underhive. The sound persists. It will outlast me. The system continues. I do not. My final calculation, 16 consumed for my survival. 2,417 consumed through my direct action. Unknown thousands more consumed through my training, my supervision, my participation across 2 centuries. Total, incalculable. Impact, irrelevant. The Imperium does not measure individual cost. It measures function. I functioned. Now I stop. Someone else will continue. The treatments will continue. The consumption will continue. The system will never stop because the system cannot stop. This is how the Imperium survives. This is what 10,000 years of continuous function requires. This is the price. I paid it. I made others pay it. I knew what I was doing. The Emperor protects. But not them. Never them. Only those who could afford to purchase protection with others' lives. I was one of them. I helped them purchase it. I administered the transactions. This was my function. This was my service. This was my life. I am dying now. The sound of the underhive is fading. My awareness is fragmenting. Soon there will be nothing left except the archive. These words, this testimony, let them stand as record. Let someone know what it cost. Let someone understand that the treatments they receive, the extended years they live, the Rejuvenat compounds that reverse their aging, all of it is purchased with lives they will never see, deaths they will never witness, people they will never acknowledge. Let them know. Let them choose. Let them calculate their own cost, or let them continue without knowing, without choosing, without calculating. Either way, the system perpetuates. I existed for 231 years by consuming 16 people and enabling the consumption of thousands more. This is what I was. This is what I did. This is what the Imperium required of me. I delivered it. I am Talvin Morok. I was human once. I do not know what I became. The sound of the underhive fades. The system continues. I do not.